Hello and welcome back to the channel. I'm Loudguns, and in today's episode we're going back to the Getting Organised series. Usually what I've done in these is focused on building fleets for various sized orgs as a base for a discussion on what you might need, but now I want to broaden this out to cover different discussion points around player organisations. So today we're going to be talking about size, and whether it matters or not. Just before we do get into the meat and potatoes of it, I wanted to say something very quickly about the current situation in Ukraine. It's a bit too close to home for me since my wife's originally from Luhansk and her parents, grandmother and brother are all still either there or in Kharkiv. Before I see any comments dressing down Russian people, I also have a great many friends from there because the regions are so heavily intertwined. And as far as I can tell, this is a war caused by a madman, and him and his cronies should be held responsible rather than normal people. So I'm sorry if videos might be a bit slow coming out, and I can't promise to be as responsive as normal. One thing I will say though is that, like many content creators, I'll often point you to a direction of ways to support the channel. But right now, if you've got cash to spare, please consider giving it to a charity or directly to support the people affected by this situation who really need that help. My wife has set up a GoFundMe where she's trying to raise money to relocate her family members. If you would like to help her, there's the link down below in the video description, but also consider great organisations like Médecins Sans Frontières or the Red Cross. But on a positive note, I've never been happier to be part of such a global community, with people from all over the world, all walks of life, coming together to share a passion. So with that said, let's get back to Star Citizen and start talking about player organisations. So the main question I want to ask is, does size matter for orgs in Star Citizen? Is there an optimum size of org, and what are the advantages and disadvantages of different size groups? The idea is that this should hopefully help org leaders plan, and other people decide on what type of group they might want to join, because I can't encourage you enough to go and join an organisation. It's really sort of when you play with others that Star Citizen comes to life. And so I would really recommend that you do that. But in order to have a decent debate around this, I'm going to come up with some categories so we can look at the positives and negatives of each. And these are just my categorizations because we need somewhere to start a discussion. You might well disagree with them, but it's just so we can have some common ground that we're all talking about. So I'm going to call any org with less than 30 members small, 30 to 100 medium, 100 to 500 large, and over 500 members mega. Of course, this will just vary massively depending on how active your members are. You know, you could have a small but very hardcore organisation which always has 30 members online, but you could have a large but very casual organisation which maybe on average has 30 members online even if it's got sort of hundreds of members. So let's just assume that these are your numbers of regular players. So by trade, I'm an investor in public companies, and I bring quite a lot of that thinking to the way I look at player orgs in SC. In finance, we classify companies by market capitalization, the total value of a company, and split them up into categories in much the same way as I've done here. The perceived advantages of small companies include that they're more nimble and better able to remain focused on doing one or two things really well. At the other end of the spectrum, large and mega cap companies are able to benefit from an idea known as vertical integration, where you own more and more of the value chain. So from a Star Citizen perspective, I don't think there's a right or wrong answer, but I do think there's a right or wrong way to use the amount of human resources you have as a group. To my mind, smaller orgs should try and pick a niche and aim to be ridiculously good at doing just that. If you spread yourselves out too much, you're going to end up spread too thin. So just as an example, if you're a smaller org, if you're trying to run a mining operation, you might end up being subscale if you try to run your mining ships, your refining ships, your security, your cargo transport. You're also more likely to have people performing roles that they're not 100% comfortable with. You know, if you happen to be relying on a couple of your org members as your primo fighter pilots, if they just don't happen to be available to show up on that day, then you might have someone who has much more limited experience providing you cover instead. So for small and medium, and maybe even the lower end of large orgs, I'd personally promote a specialised approach. Focus on one thing and focus on doing it really, really well. So if you want to focus on mining, then work to be the most efficient mining crew that you can be. And if you're small, use that to your advantage. There's more chance that the same people will crew up together and slot into the same sort of place within an op. And you can then look to other orgs who have chosen different niches, maybe security or cargo hauling, to work together and build your operation without the risk of being too thinly spread. And at the other end of the scale though are the large and mega orgs, and here instead the goal should be vertical integration. Ideally you want to limit the amount of cash and work that's leaving the org, so you just get better at recycling. I put this together when the Frontier community hit 1,000 members. We're just now on the verge of 2,000, so I guess I've got an update to do. But its main purpose was a visual representation of what 1,000 people could look like in the verse if we all rolled out at the same time. And this follows the sort of ethos we're using to build our organisation, Frontier Consolidated, with 4 major divisions: industrial, military, exploration and logistics. And these 4 overarching divisions cover the vast majority of planned game loops, and would allow us to pass contracts between ourselves rather than outsourcing. So if the industrial folks are out on a mining operation, they can bring all of their own refining capabilities as well. They might also bring along a salvage crew just in case they find a wreck out there while they're searching for minables. Exploration can have provided the data in advance on any good finds, and the team can head out safe in the knowledge that that data hasn't been sold on to anyone else as well. The military wing provides security, and the logistics arm are on hand to haul away any refined metals and get it to market, while also making sure the team have any spare parts or repairs they need along the way. So larger orgs can also benefit from economies of scale. With more assets and members, it's likely the larger groups will be able to upgrade ships and components faster. It may not make sense to have something like your own Endeavour for overclocking parts as a small group, but if you've got the demand to justify it because you've got sort of 50, 100 ships, then that purchase could make sense sort of as a pooled investment in the game. Something I reckon we've got to talk about is the realities of multi-crew ships. As part of this series, I like to talk about the MMO that we're looking forward to as opposed to the game as it is right now. So while the current use case of multi-crew ships is more about the fun of it at the moment, and the economic advantage, like credits per hour rates, sit with single-seaters, I'm going to assume that in the future multi-crew ships are likely to be more efficient once we have more systems like upkeep, maintenance, fuel, etc. Really having an impact, and once range is a much bigger factor than it is now. Ultimately, there are ships in Star Citizen that a 30-person group wouldn't be able to fully crew, even with every member online together. Ships like the Javelin have a stated crew of 12 to 80 persons. Personally, I reckon the minimum is vastly understating things. The standard counter to this is, I'll use NPCs, but surely this has to be balanced to the extent that we don't have 1 or 2 human crew members on a capital ship rolling around with everything manned by AI. So you might think you want this if you're more of a lone wolf, but I don't think you really do. If you can efficiently crew something like a Javelin with a couple of real players, what's going to stop a mega org rolling out with hundreds of Javelins? So as I've hinted before, I hope there's a sweet spot for player to NPC ratios at around 70 to 30. Some jobs on ships, like manning a size 2 point defense turret, are likely to be fairly boring. So if you can outsource these to AI blades or NPCs to ensure that your org mates have more interesting roles, then that'd be great. But ultimately I feel that running a ship with more than 50% AI should be prohibitively expensive, to the point that you're losing money running missions with it. And in terms of capabilities, it should always fall short of a ship fully manned by competent human players. The reason I'm dwelling on this a bit is that if we have ships like this, I'd assume that we'll have content designed for ships like this. So I really hope CIG design content for all levels of the game in terms of both PvE and PvP. But if your org can't crew some of the larger ships or put out a certain size of fleet, then you'll probably find some of this content is just beyond your reach. Of course, this is where diplomacy comes in, and I'm really hoping that this provides the grounds for player orgs to work together. But large and mega orgs are likely to be able to skip the diplo and get right to it with running endgame content in terms of raids and PvP. For smaller orgs again, I reckon the best idea is to specialise, making yourselves desirable for a bigger org to hire. In a combat situation, maybe you could form a wolf pack that have perfected raiding enemy supply lines, or a crack fighter squadron ready to roll out with your own Kraken to launch off. Reputation's going to be key here for sure. Autonomy is probably one of the biggest themes in terms of what size of org you want to sign on with. In more years than I'd like to admit of gaming, I've tried most types of clan, guild, org, whatever it's called in that particular game. I've done the megas all the way down to playing with just a few of my IRL mates, and I've had fun doing nearly all of it. I did once join a pretty hardcore PvP guild and retired after being barked at by a Sergeant Major impersonator. A big question you'll have to ask yourself is how much autonomy you're willing to give up. You're always going to lose some playing as a group. If you want total autonomy, then make like Kevin Costner in Waterworld, load up your boat and head out into the stars alone. But as you go up the scale from the smalls to the megas, then you as an individual are going to have less of a say in what goes down in the org. Even if it's a fully democratic organisation that puts every decision to a vote, your voice can be 1 in 10 or it can be 1 in 1,000. And ultimately, there are going to be times when decisions have to be made that can't be down to a vote, particularly the more members you have. So if you're desperate to maintain control over your own destiny in Star Citizen, then maybe a smaller org is for you. But the other side of this particular coin is the potential that you as a group have. By this I mean that if you're a group of 30 in a verse with orgs that number into the thousands, you're probably not going to be taking control of the highest value territory, or grabbing and maintaining control of one of the Bengal carriers scattered around the verse. Of course, I know there are going to be comments, even after I say this because somebody's just hit pause and is already typing, that skill matters more than numbers. You know, I love Avenger 1's videos and have watched him smash in 5 and 6v1s. And seriously, I can't wait for those exceptions that prove the rule. You know, the stories of Lil Cruz winning against all odds, or the group of 3 prospectors who strike the richest seam of Quantanium in the galaxy. But these are going to be the exceptions, let's face it. Things like skill between individual players will average out, and ultimately bigger orgs will probably beat smaller ones if they get into a fight or competition over resources. So if your dream in Star Citizen is to participate in some of the biggest battles and sort of be part of one of the richest organisations out there with, you know, a skyscraper of your own on Area 18, then maybe you need to consider joining a larger organisation to make that happen. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and like I said, I really hope some of these more theorycraft based episodes help to stimulate a debate. I'm just presenting my opinions on stuff, you know, it's not me saying this is how it must be. And it's not like I have all of the answers, I just strongly encourage healthy disagreement. Let me know in the comments if you have other views. Just as always, just try and keep it civil with one another. Nobody's views are stupid at all. If you did enjoy it and you think I've earned it, consider hitting those like and subscribe buttons to tell the YouTube overlords that I'm doing a good job. And if you'd like to join an organisation or a community of players, or make some friends in the verse, please feel free to come and say hello to us on Discord, the link's just down in the video description below. And with all that said, thank you very much for watching all the way to the end, and I look forward to seeing you next time.